I see you, Zaynab. I'm waiting for other people to join. See what happens. This time I'm going to do it right. I'm going to make sure that I introduce whatever we're doing, and then I'm going to have you come in. Let's see if it works out right today. Last week I was like not sure what I was doing. Good evening to anyone that joins. Let's see if anyone joins. I wonder if I'm being blocked because we're talking about white supremacy. Can you imagine? So just give it a few minutes and then we'll start. I'm sure people are running around and commuting or doing whatever they're doing. I'm drinking tea again. Hot tea. So let me just start, even though we have 3 visitors. I just want to begin and introduce myself before we start the live. And so we only have an hour, so I want to make sure that we're starting exactly on time. My name is Antonio Morales. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm the founder of the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, LLC. And part of this live is a series, it's an IG live series, under the Freedom Fighters of the Mind initiative, which is an initiative that is designed for Black and brown therapists who are actively engaged in addressing and challenging white supremacy in their work. Now, their work can mean, working with their clients and sort of exploring how white supremacy impacts their clients' lives, or even working in their organizations or institutions and sort of challenging white supremacy through that way. So the Freedom Fighters of the Minds is an initiative for Black and brown therapists and other mental health professionals who serve Black and brown and BIPOC folk. The Liberated Self Therapeutic Services is a private practice, of course. And the mission, which I love to read the mission statement, even though I haven't memorized it, is to disrupt and dismantle the psychological chaos and confusion of white supremacy, facilitating a transformative process that will allow Black and brown Black and brown folk to heal from and transcend the adverse impact of white supremacy in all areas of their lives. Now, I'm reading this from the website, and so I love reading the mission statement, even though I haven't memorized it, because it just speaks to what it is that we want to do with the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, LLC. Now, this is, like I said earlier, this is the IG Live series. It's Unpacking White Supremacy in the Mental Health Field. And the intention of unpacking white supremacy in mental health field is just basically to bring awareness to how white supremacy can impact our work and our clients. And it's not typically the conversation we tend to have when it comes when mental health professionals are out there in these streets talking about our work, but it's something super important, especially when we're Black or brown therapists or BIPOC therapists who are facing the challenges that come from working in a predominantly white mental health field. And so white supremacy has to be had. You have to have a conversation about that if you really want to be able to do the work in the most effective way possible with the most integrity intact. And we cannot sort of ignore white supremacy just because it makes some people feel uncomfortable. That being said, this is a series that's going to continue up until the summer. And today's guest is Zaynab Khan. She's a psychologist. And let me just, before I bring Zaynab on, I just want to say that Zaynab and I have, a history for about 5 years. I met Zaynab at Rutgers University, where I was formerly employed at the counseling center there called CAPS. And Zaynab really, when I first came into the space, I was sort of an oddball out because just of how I expressed myself, how I looked, my whole effect. I was a man of color, right, in a predominantly white space. And so it wasn't like an easy sort of thing to step into that space. And I wasn't sort of welcomed with open arms. And so from the very beginning, I was sort of advocating for myself on behalf of myself as well as students of color. And Zaynab was one of the first people who joined me in that conversation. And Zaynab has been a partner with me in the work that we've done at Rutgers University as we sort of spearhead D&I diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, as well as anti-racism work at the counseling center that we worked at under the Justice and Equity team. And we had a lot of hours and hours of having conversations and trying to make sense of some of the challenges that we were dealing with. But we really learned a lot from the work that we were doing. And so I thought, Zaynab is a perfect person to have this conversation. You bring her into this IG series so that she can express what she's learned or share whatever it is that she needs to share. So I just want to welcome Zaynab. Zaynab, if you can find a way to include yourself, or I can find you, hold on, and then I'll ask you to introduce yourself. Zaynab, I should have invited you already. Zaynab, are you there? Let's see, hold on. Oh, okay. Okay. You can't join yet. There you go.
There we go.
Hey, Zaynab.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I have a little bit of a sore throat, and I really think it's white supremacy trying for me not to attend this live. But I fought it, and I've been drinking tea all day, and hoping that I'll be able to share some insights. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Zaynab, can you lower your camera down a little bit so I can see your face fully?
Okay.
There you go. I think, because I see like.
Okay.
Like
I see the comments. So
yeah. So let me just make a disclaimer for the people in the comment section. We love comments. We want comments. We want people to engage in this conversation. However, please don't take it personally if I don't see the comments, because I'm following sort of an agenda. And so at the end of this conversation, we're hoping to take question and answers from anyone who's in the chat. But we also can sort of engage with you in the meantime. But just understand and know that There's an agenda that we're working through, and so it's not personal if we're not giving you direct, quick, fast attention. Zaynab, I introduced you, and I want you to introduce yourself too. But before you introduce yourself, right, and before you go into the technicalities about who you are and what it is that you do and where you work, I would like for you to do an icebreaker with me, and
Okay.
or like do an icebreaker and
Okay.
join in this icebreaker.
Okay.
And so the icebreaker basically, I want you to consider, because we oftentimes forget that where we come from, right, is because our ancestors got us here, right? Like there's
Mm.
shoulders that we stand on top of. And so I always think that it's important to celebrate the people we come from, or the ancestors, our elders, because that's how we got here, right? And it makes no sense to me that we sort of forget them in the beginning of conversations, like honoring our ancestors and where we come from and our people, which is in essence honoring who we are and celebrating who we are today. And it's funny because I've been thinking about this conversation because most recently I've been going through like this like spiritual like quest that I've been on, and my grandmother was an Afro-Boricua woman, and she really was into the Yoruba religion, or at least spiritual practices, and I've been sort of curious about that, and so I've been thinking about my grandmother a lot, and I realized that my grandmother was dope. Like I feel like she was like, you know what I'm saying, like a warrior. But yet we don't really see that. She's just like a woman, in the hood in like Brooklyn, coming from Puerto Rico and just sort of like making ends meet. But considering all the odds that were stacked against her and all the kids that she had, she was actually like a warrior. And so I've been thinking about, her warrior spirit and how that sort of impacted my life and how that's inside of my body. And so that's why I thought about this sort of icebreaker to sort of celebrate, not only my ancestors, but where I'm standing now, because I think, again, that's an important sort of aspect. So, without further ado, I want to know about where your people come from, where your ancestors come from, and tell us about like some of maybe a positive characteristic or attribute that you have inherited from your peoples.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, the funny thing is, most people have no idea where I'm from. They often guess like either South Asian or Middle Eastern, and not that. So I always have to say I'm from the West Indies. I was born in Trinidad, and my mom's family's from Guyana, and both were colonized by England. So we speak English. And so I've been saying this since I was young, because no one ever knew where I came from. And so I've been basically telling a white supremacy story my whole life to explain my heritage, because with that heritage, my ancestors came from probably India, Persia, but because they were indentured servants in the 1800s, likely, all that history beyond is lost. Like we don't have a connection. We lost the language. Certain things are kept in the food, but so much of my ancestry is stolen from me. And I've really been wondering about that, and almost, this sounds so weird, but almost wanting to go to India and see where my family was from, and connect back to those roots. Even though growing up I had no connection to India at all. It was always Trinidad and Guyana. And when I looked up where my family is from, which is Uttar Pradesh, it's like where the Taj Mahal is, famous for, there was history of those people rebelling against British colonization. Obviously they lost, but they had some big battles there, and they were hard to colonize. And I love that, because I re-owned, like, oh my God, my ancestors have been fighting white supremacy forever. Like they've been trying to fight this for hundreds of years. And so I feel like that spirit of rebelling and fighting comes from my ancestors, and I don't even know this till like maybe a month ago. But I do honor my grandparents, because that's who I feel closest to. They all died when I was very young, but my grandfathers were like religious leaders and such helpers in the community, and I really feel like my parents embody that, helping the community. And then my grandmothers one had 8 children, one had 9 children, so they were just strong matriarchs. And the beautiful thing about my family is the women are so strong. Like I think my mom, and she would not take shit from anyone. And so, and my aunts and my cousins, and just the women in our family are so strong. And I think one hard thing that I've been wrestling with is in America, because of white supremacy, because of racism and sexism, people see people that look like me, like Asian, Muslim, like as submissive or weak or quiet or people pleasing, I've been called, right? Like all these terms. And so when they see me speak up, they almost get shocked. And it's such a weird balance because I come from these strong women, and then I have these like stereotypes placed on me to be submissive or to be shut down. And it's been really a weird balance to know my ancestry, to know my mom is such a strong woman, and then to be put down so badly in this world as like, be silent, shut up, don't talk, be a good girl. And so I think like I've always been struggling with that balance, because of course sometimes being a good girl has privilege, right? Like you get promotions, you get things, but sometimes it silences you. You have to fall in line. And so I've been like holding on to that rebel spirit of my ancestors.
And so how would you say that that shows up currently, like in your life, like that rebel spirit?
I think just doing things non-traditionally, like breaking even from the traditions I was raised with. So my parents are very religious, and I've recently developed a love for tarot cards, and I'm sure they're gonna hate tarot cards. And look, even the one I got for today is about summoning power. And so I felt like that, like the spirits, the angels are sending sort of like summoning our power about this topic and standing up to it.
Nice. Okay, thank you. That was interesting to hear about. Like, you know, even though we work together and stuff, you know, sometimes we don't know those sort of explicit details about someone's sort of ancestry and how that sort of brings, how that you come forward with that now. And so thank you for sharing that. Now, I would like you to, this is the time where you get to introduce what it is that you do, like where are you located, what kind of work do you do right now, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Oh, I'm a psychologist.
Your introduction. Is your formal introduction.
I'm a psychologist, and I have my own private practice called Therapy. So you can follow me or check my website out. And my practice means a lot to me. I just started it this year, and it really was like a project of freedom and having control, not being subjugated by powers that be anymore. And I've been very lucky that it's successful. It's dedicated to healing trauma, and especially people of color, LGBTQ plus people, especially trans people, queer, Muslims in general, and just South Asian people. So really the people who don't get served to be served. And I see racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia as trauma. And so that's just integrated into my work. And so the other thing that's close to my heart is the only insurance I take is Medicaid, because it's so underserved. So not only am I helping people of color, but people who don't have a lot of resources. And so that has really warmed my heart. And I think people think you can't be successful doing something like taking Medicaid, but you can. And I've had the best clients, and it's been magical. And honestly, it's just sad because I have to turn down people. Like within 2-3 weeks, I was full.
Wow.
I start telling people I don't have space, and I have like a waiting list now. So I think follow your heart, follow your purpose is what I would give from that experience.
Yes, listen, I hear you. And, you know, I wanted to sort of ask, like, so is it because most therapists don't take Medicaid that is why you get booked so quick?
Yeah, there's sadly not a lot of therapists. There are some agencies, but they get full really quick. So there's not a lot of psychologists that take Medicaid, unfortunately. So, you know, and it's really easy. I would say out of all the insurance horror stories I've ever heard, Medicaid has been really easy. So if there's a plug out there for some people to start taking some, it does pay less than other things, but it's worth it, I think, if it's your values.
Got it. So how long have you been in the mental health field?
Well, I was thinking about that. I feel like I've always been a therapist in my life and my family, but I started grad school in 2005. So now it's probably 16 years that I've been working as a therapist.
Okay, and what inspired you to become a therapist, to get into the field?
I think to heal pain. I just grew up hearing tragedy all around me, whether it was family, whether it was community members, whether it was my own family, just wanting to heal pain and trauma, and both for myself too, just wanting to find the answers to what creates healing.
Right.
And so I just really wanted to find those answers and heal people, heal. That's just very simply. And I've always been the listener of my friend group. So I feel like I've had practice from a young age.
Okay, now I just got like there was a question in the comments section, and I know that we're not supposed to like get distracted by the questions, but do you see the question?
Yes.
Can you answer that?
So to be a therapist,
So what requirements would you need to be a therapist or in this sort of field?
I think just going to grad school, but you know, like whether it's a master's or a doctoral program, and they kind of help you along that path with all the requirements. Obviously a passion for people, wanting to work with people, kindness, caring, and especially if you've been through hard things, I do think that gives you more empathy. And so I don't know if that answers the question. We can also talk to you after too.
Yeah. So we could be a psychologist, right? Or we
Yeah.
can come in as a licensed licensed clinical social worker. There's also licensed professional social workers. I mean, counselors. What else? I feel like I'm missing like 2.
I think that's for the.
I just because I think there's like a sort of misinformation out there that only psychologists can do therapy.
Okay.
With like a whole bunch of us can do therapy.
Yeah.
That are not psychologists. So I just wanted to like name the other like labels.
Okay.
So with that being said, thank you for your introduction and thank you for like letting me know like what brought you into this field.
Yeah.
Now, this is a question for you to answer, and now it's not supposed to be the right answer. It's supposed to be what makes sense to you. So in your own words, how would you define or describe white supremacy?
Okay. So being an immigrant, even though I came here when I was 2 years old.
By the way, can I just stop you real quick?
Sure.
So I just want to say, you see this, the little hat?
The little Christmas hat.
Right, my sister, because I was drinking this, I was like, I don't know, on some like Zoom or something with her, or like Facebook, and then she's like, you look like a stripper, because I had the little hat. It doesn't look like a stripper cup, does it? I mean, it's like a fantasy for me to be.
Live.
Huh?
You're gonna make me choke in the live.
No, but that's what she said, that this cup makes me look, because of the little hat. It look like a stripper hat. It could be.
Maybe.
I don't mind. Anyway, I just had to say that. I know I promote mugs.
Personal time is your business.
Yeah, exactly. All right, sorry, go.
So yeah, so being an immigrant, even though I was here from 2, I always felt like I didn't know what the right thing was. So I would say words wrong or something. So for example, I would say, I'm gonna go hot up my food. And then I'd get immediately corrected, like, do you mean heat up your food? or I couldn't say tissues for a long time. I would say tissues. So I would always get corrected. So I started asking, like, what's the right way? I've even asked my American friends, like, how do you put on bed sheets? Like, it was this immigrant kind of like, I don't know. But Antonio, what do you think I was asking when I was asking what's the right way?
Well, every time I hear what's the right way in the context that we're discussing, I feel like what's the white way?
Exactly.
Right.
I wasn't asking like what Black people do or Latino people do, I was asking what's the white way, because in my mind, being an immigrant, white equals right. White equals standard. White equals the best. And as an immigrant, you have to just do the thing that they say, the standard, the way of success, the way you dress, the way you do your hair. It was always from a white lens. And so even though I was asking what's the right way, ironically, I was asking what the white way was. And what's sad as an immigrant is people reinforce that. They would tell me the white way, and they would hold whiteness as the standard. And so that's what I see white supremacy as, that this false belief that whiteness is the best, that it's the standard, that it's what we should live up to. and erase everything about ourselves, or you know, like it dehumanizes and degrades everything about it. Because being an immigrant, there was a lot of amazing things from my family, my culture, my religion that were so good, but I always was like looking for this right way to do things.
Yeah, like what I keep hearing in your answers, like the erasure, the erasure of me,
Yeah.
right? This sort of ongoing sort of effort, you know, whether intentionally, unintentionally, but obviously it's always intentionally
Yes.
in the
Yes.
back. That's what you know the social conditioning is. Um, I keep hearing like, you know, at any cost, right? When you think about somebody who is coming from another country or is, you know, a person of color, that we have to erase who we are in order to exist
Yes.
in this kind of in this society, right? In
Yes.
this sort of world that we live in, especially in the United States. And so that's what I keep hearing inside of your explanation of white supremacy is the erasure of everything else that's not white.
Yes. And that anything my family did, my culture, my religion was not good enough. It was just,
Yeah.
it didn't meet that standard that was
Mm-hmm.
out there. And so
Right.
it was sort of like I had to like push down the things that I grew up with in chasing this sort of white standard, and not realizing like no matter what we do, they're never going to accept us. We're never going to be white. And so they're never going to accept us. But how much did we lose in this process? To fit their standards, to fit their way of success. I really think about how much I've lost trying to fit this standard.
Dang, I think and when you say how much I lost, I think of how much I had to sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm translating in my head in language that makes sense to me. Like how much did I have to sacrifice in order to merely exist?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
And the years of self-doubt, self-criticism, just not thinking I was good enough when that made no sense. It was just that I wasn't white. I wasn't fighting whatever standards there was out there.
And you know what's so crazy? Like even listening to what you're saying, like this sort of sacrificing of who you are, the erasure of who you are, I literally am left feeling exhausted.
Yes.
Like it just, even the idea, the concept of it, right? Of sort of having to maneuver through the world in that way is exhausting. Like, it's like, I'm left with like, I almost feel like I want to just like crash right now, right? Because it's, imagine like year after year after year after year for your whole entire life having to like exist inside of that context, right? Sort of maneuvering through this sort of white society that we live in, and how much energy, goodness gracious.
Yes.
Right?
And to never meet it. Like, I think what was sad about it is you work so hard and you're still not good enough. They'll still turn on you immediately. Like you just never get the acceptance that they falsely tell you to do. You know, like they're making, it's like such a propaganda because they're making us chase some success, some dream, and it's unreachable as a person of color, as a woman of color.
Yeah, no, I got it. Totally got that. Now, since we sort of delved into your sort of definition of white supremacy and how you sort of describe it, when you think about the mental health field, right, overall, all of your experiences into mental health field from the very beginning, can you give me 3 examples, like, you know, small examples of how white supremacy shows up in the mental health field?
Yeah. Well, I want to take that because, Antonio, what do you picture when you see a therapist? What's like your image of a therapist?
I mean, back in the day or now?
Back in the day.
Back in the day, it was a white person.
Yeah, like you wore your little sweater, you had your books, you had your like little table, and I think from that thing is the mental health field is white supremacy. It's based on whiteness, and so in like everything is standardized on white people. I mean, if we think of all the research, all the stuff, it's only recently they're starting to do people of color, and not even from a real way. They're not examining what people of color need. They're just including them in the samples. So psychology and the field of mental health is based on whiteness. Whiteness is the standard. Whiteness is right. And so all of us have been trained to be this like white therapist. And I really, in preparing for this, I really thought like I didn't even have people of color supervisors. for so long. Most
Right.
of my supervisors were white.
Ooh.
So how could they help a Muslim West Indian woman understand it? I was supposed to be neutral, but I wasn't. I wasn't what, like, I wasn't white. I was me. And so I just,
oh no.
and so I think from the beginning, everything is this white standard. And I just think about, for example, if it's a white standard, then that's what we're measuring things at, then everything is seen as different or pathologizing. So for example, CBT, very popular therapy and can be helpful, right? But whose objective reality are we using? Right? A lot of times it's a white perspective. So if I go into therapy and I say I have social anxiety, they're just going to diagnose me and they're going to say you have social anxiety. They're not going to be like, oh, are you worried about being discriminated against? I have this a lot with my trans students where they felt like they had so much anxiety. But when you start understanding it, it's like they don't want to get violence. They don't want to get kicked out of bathrooms. They don't want to be, you know, mistreated. And so that's not social anxiety. That's survival. That's survival anxiety. That's really about being hypervigilant to the realities of harm.
Yeah.
So if the objective reality is whiteness and we're using that, think about how many times white therapists, and I've experienced this myself, deny our realities, deny that we are being discriminated against or we're being disrespected, or, you know. And I really think about my first year of grad school, of a very well-liked white male professor basically told me I only got into this program because I was diverse. He erased everything about me. I had a 4.0 in my double major of psychology and sociology. I finished college in 3 years. I had research experience and practical experience in those 3 years. But no, I only got in because of my skin color. And what was terrible about that was I couldn't even go to anyone because he was so well liked. So when I told people, they'd be like, no, I don't think he meant that. I don't think he meant that. I think he's saying like, it's just a bonus. But that's not the impression I felt. It felt like, you're lucky to be here. You're lucky that we allowed you into this program because you don't deserve to be here. Even though I had every qualification as my peers. And so that started this, oh, I have to do it the right way. And it was very white, right? My supervisors are white. Most of my professors are white. And even the people of color professors, I felt like they weren't themselves. Even though they were famous and amazing and influential, they still had to play this game. And I felt that. I felt like we had to act a certain way to be accepted. And I feel like that's how therapists are. You have to like do it a certain way, stick to the time boundaries, not self-disclose, never take gifts, never have tea with your clients, like all this like stuff, that is just all about whiteness. And so I think that's huge in our field. Just like whiteness is the standard and all our techniques were based on whiteness. And then the other thing is just the silence. Like I've literally not talked about this. So you creating this space is huge. When I do have a class and I teach it, these are the first times they're talking about white supremacy, about racism, about sexism. They don't, and my class right now is people of color or marginalized people from communities, and they just feel like they have to take whatever abuse they get. And I'm like, no, like this is,
no,
right.
No, Courtney, you out of your mind.
And listen, haven't we been told like, oh, I never use the R word as like a pride, right?
Ave Maria.
And the R word is racism. And that is how it is in psychology. There's silencing. You can't talk about racism, discrimination, all of this stuff. You can't talk about it. You go to a therapist and then they'll just tell you like, oh, I'll help you deal with it. They don't honor and recognize it. And listen, a criticism of therapy is that it is a tool of the oppressor because it helps you deal with the oppression, because you just think it's all about you, that it's something wrong with you, and then they help you survive the oppression. And so therapy can be used.
That's an excellent point.
Yes.
Yes.
And so as therapists, we have to make sure we're not helping people survive racism or sexism or transphobia or homophobia or any type of oppression or exploitation. Because if we are, then we're just as bad as the oppressors. Like, and that's really real from feminist kind of theories, right? Like, we wouldn't want someone to stay in an abusive relationship, but we allow people to stay in racism. We tell them to just deal with it, like be stronger, deal with it, survive, resilient. And that's not fair, because that should not be our job. We should not be complicit in helping all of this stuff. We should be empowering our clients to stand up, even if that means, for example, leaving our jobs or starting something new, right?
Yeah.
We should not tell them just go back and deal with it. We should not be giving them breathing techniques to go back and deal with racism. That's not.
I'm getting triggered. Yeah, it's funny because last week during our last live, somebody mentioned, or there was a point sort of brought up about, how much are we sort of complicit with the problem, or how much are we the problem?
Yeah.
And it sort of speaks to what you're speaking to right now, is like looking at how, based on how the structures of the mental health field are set up, the sort of protocols and so on and so forth, we might be sort of perpetuating white supremacy. Not even like, it doesn't seem intentional, but when you think about the larger systems outside of that, it's all by design, right? And it's like even scary to even think about it, because then it makes you feel like, damn, like what am I supposed to do now? Like as a mental health professional or therapist.
And we'll get to that. I want to go. The third point I wanted to make, silencing and the standard being white, is villainization. So racism, I hope, now listen, I know Trump messed us up, but most of the time people don't say, I hate Black people, I hate Muslims, I hate women. Most time people are smart not to say those things. We'll exclude Trump for a second. But the idea being that it's now through villainization, right? So, and this is for the audience too. So what did we call indigenous people to commit genocide?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, you and the audience.
Savages.
Savages, right?
Yes.
We call them savages. Even though not me, colonizers came here and literally killed them off through disease and violence, right? Yes. But they were the savages. Okay.
Yes.
What did they call Black people to enslave them?
I mean, savages? What?
But less than.
They
used a Bible quote.
So subhuman.
Yes, they used a Bible quote of Blackness to say that God was sort of saying that these people deserve to be enslaved, right? So it was villainization. And then research, including psychological research, tried to justify that Black people were less than, right? Whether IQ, whether all those things. So there's a history. And I'll just do a modern one. What do they call Muslims to use the travel ban and lock them up without any...
terrorists.
Terrorists. You put a terrorist and you throw them in a cell. And the hard part about that is mental health is used. Did you know on Rutgers, where we worked, FBI agents literally walked up to Muslim men and said, why were you in therapy?
Really?
Because they were going to say, like, this puts you at risk to be a terrorist, and lock them up. So
what puts them at risk to be a therapist?
Any
Going to
mental
therapy?
health concern. Any mental health concern. And so mental health can be used against people of color.
That's right.
Easily. And so that villainization. Now, and this is also for the audience, what does psychology do? Or what does DSM, what do we do to people, to clients? It's another word than villainization.
Yeah. You want me to answer?
Yeah.
Pathologize?
Huh?
Pathologize?
Pathologize.
Right.
This is another word.
I feel like I'm winning.
I'm
winning.
Yay.
I hope there's a cash prize after this.
I'll buy you some tea. Yes, pathologize. So the mental health field is stuck on pathologizing people, right?
Yes.
They want to put labels, they want to put things. And so, for example, what did Black people used to get diagnosed with a lot and then get institutionalized?
The schizophrenia.
Yeah, paranoid.
I know my history. Stop playing with me. Sure.
Right? Do you know what Asian and Latinx people were often blamed with for cultural stuff?
No, I gotta take a pass on that one.
But somatic. So they would show their feelings through somatic symptoms, and then they would be called crazy. Like, you're overreacting, you're crazy, this is all in your head. But they would show it through the body. Now, research shows trauma shows up in the body. Like, there's so much research to show that one way we express trauma is through our bodies. That's not that Asian and Latinx people weren't like valid, but that the white standard was used to pathologize them and throw medicine on them rather than heal their traumas. And so I think that's really something as therapists that we have to be careful. So when a client comes in with anxiety, but they're facing discrimination, why would we give them the label of anxiety?
Right.
Right? Because then they start walking around thinking what, Antonio?
That they're anxious.
That they're anxious. And
there's something wrong with them.
Exactly. We start reinforcing this idea that there's something wrong with people.
Right.
And that is so dangerous.
That's right.
Because it's coming from us with power, telling these people that something's wrong with you when they're just dealing with life, whether that's trauma, like, you know, sexual assault, or bigger traumas like racism, sexism, poverty, right? And if we're going to pathologize them, they're going to walk around thinking something's wrong with them. They're not strong enough. They're not, you know, they can't fight this, rather than understanding how what's happened to them has affected them, and it makes sense that it's affected them this way. I always use this analogy when my clients expect to be strong, and my client told me today it helped her, of like, you can't expect to go in a burning building and not get burned. That's like crazy to expect that you're going to survive racism, sexism, all this stuff, and never get hurt, never get burned. But we always train people of color, LGBT people. You just have to be strong. You just have to put up with it. You just have to be, you have to rise above, rather than questioning the systems of oppression. And I think like that's where our power as therapists is to stop pathologizing and diagnosing and putting people down and throwing them on medicine when it's really their trauma and oppression that's affecting them. We need to start empowering them, advocating for them, helping them find community to build themselves up, and that's how we break this white supremacy. Because white supremacy, because Antonio or the audience, why do you think white supremacy wants us to think something's wrong with us?
So that we could depend on them for the answers, or for being fixed, and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
Don't be a professor with me.
They can continue to exploit us. If we think something's wrong with us,
yes,
they'll continue to exploit us.
Great point.
If we know we're strong and powerful and amazing, we would gather together and fight it.
That's right.
If they diagnose us and say, you have anxiety, you have depression, you have bipolar, we're going to all think we're weak, damaged, broken, and not stand up to them. And this is why it's really important for us to give clients and people the knowledge that it's not something wrong with you. It's an expected result of the pain you've been through, but you can heal from this and empower yourself. Nothing's wrong with you.
That's right. Now, I know, like, I feel like you went into, like, you expanded on the pathologizing part. So I was wondering, out of the examples you shared, if you can sort of illustrate one specific one out of the three that you did share. I feel like you shared 4, but it could have been 3.
Okay.
Can you give me, like, can you expand on one of the examples and sort of talk, like, illustrate or tell us a story about that, so we could get more to depth, like a specific example? Yeah. Of how you've seen white supremacy show up in the mental health field. Because remember, you named 3, and so I just want you to expand on 1.
You know, I think that what I want to talk about is just the impact that it has on us, people of color therapists. And so when we speak up for racism and for fighting for equality for our clients, we get a lot of backlash. And so, for example, one initiative that I did was stop forcing trans people to get therapy to get on hormones. And that's in the standard. You don't need to be in therapy to get hormones. And there was a practice where the doctors send them to us. They didn't need therapy. They just needed their medical treatment. And it was such a fight. I mean, I had Dr. Sasso come in as a consultant to help me fight this point, but these students were getting pathologized as something wrong with them just for wanting medical care. And they didn't need to come with us. And until we fought that, then they stopped coming. And then we did have less clients because they weren't forced to come to us for these letters or for this sign off. And that's a way like psychology is being used to pathologize trans people, that they need some like psychological help to get medical care, to get what they need. And this is like a really bad way the mental health field is using psychology. And then when we advocate, like I remember when one of my first clients had a suicide attempt, like people were like, oh my God, she doesn't know what she's doing. She's advocating too much for this stuff. And look at them. Meanwhile, the reason the person had a suicide attempt is family non-acceptance, which is the #1 risk factor for LGBT folks, when their families don't accept them. And I'm gonna do one more thing with you, Antonio. So trans people, 50% will make one suicide attempt if their family's non-accepting. What percentage do you think it goes down to when their family's accepting?
So you said 50%?
Yeah.
If the family's accepting, man, I mean, I feel like it would go, I mean, because the family is such a big component to one's life, right? And sort of being accepted by them is like the beginning of everything.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, maybe like 20%?
It's actually 4.
Wow, like it all the way drops.
Yeah.
Just family acceptance. That's interesting.
And that's an example of how we pathologize the trans people when it's a circumstantial thing that's affecting their mental health. It's not something wrong with trans people. It's society that makes their family transphobic, that takes away that love, right? And that's for LGBT folks in general too. And so I think that's an example of how pathologizing the communities, these marginalized communities, really affect mental health. And us advocating for it are seen as, oh my God, like you let someone commit suicide. Like it was like my fault. I mean, sorry, not commit a suicide attempt. But that wasn't about me. That was really about the family. And that's why I created that family non-acceptance group as part of my work, because that was the #1 risk factor for suicide.
Got it. And so how would you describe the impact of, say, a trans person coming, you know, for services and needing to basically be pathologized to move forward with their transition if they felt like transitioning?
Yes. Yeah. Like I've had people come in with super high scores, like anxiety, depression, everything, and just being affirmed. So believe that they're trans, those numbers go down. I really wish I had the graphs to show people. So just having the affirmation from a professional, this is the good use of our power, that what they believe is real. Like that's like cis people don't question their gender. They just don't.
Right.
And so, and then suicide goes down. And like I said, the only thing, once they start getting medical treatment, the main thing that bothers them is the family non-acceptance or societal non-acceptance. So hard time finding jobs, hard time being accepted. And why that's an important example is they are showing symptoms of anxiety and depression, but it's not an inherent problem with them. It's the society, it's the context, it's the transphobia. So, and that's what people don't see. They think, oh, that person has anxiety, something's wrong with them. They're not seeing that that's the natural impact to these oppressive forces, to racism, to sexism. And so, but the reason they want to pathologize trans people, for example, is to take away their rights, not let them transition. you know, make them homeless, make them, right? Because they don't want those people to exist, for example. And so, but that happens in all communities, right? Because what's the first thing that happens when there's a police shooting of a Black person? What's the first thing that they'll start reporting?
About the person's history, that they're
Yeah,
like a thug, or they did this, they have a
yeah,
criminal history, you know, I mean, we know
yeah.
the.
Yeah, so we criticize ISIS, but we're allowed to commit public executions in America of Black people, right? And so I'm just saying, like, it doesn't matter. They're, whatever they did, they don't deserve execution on the streets, never. And so,
Yes.
but we immediately victim blame. And part of that
Yeah.
victim blaming that we do in mental health is the overdiagnosing, over-pathologizing.
Yeah.
And like someone wrote, yes, the overdiagnosis of schizophrenia in Black men, when
Yes.
it's just healthy cultural suspicion.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So, like, if you can sort of share with me, like, can you tell me about a time that you sort of challenged white supremacy in the mental health field, and talk about that experience and the impact of that, or what kind of feedback you got from that?
Sure. In many of my settings, I've always advocated for my students of color. But specifically at my last job, I was part of that team advocating for anti-racism to really be put into place. Now, anti-racism is really different than assimilation. And most places with diversity, equity, and inclusion are talking about assimilation. They want us to blend. They want to tone police us. They want us to speak a certain way, do things their way. Anti-racism is about understanding that each person's communication style, each person's way of expressing themselves is valid. There's no differences between the races, that we all are a community. And so asking for support, because the thing is, clients were really criticizing the lack of people of color therapists or the lack of LGBT affirmative therapists at our center. And so standing up to try to get more equality for people to be accepted and loved for who they are was really like met with such backlash. I've had people say, oh, I already did this work, I don't know what you're talking about. Or tone police. I've been called insubordinate. I've been called pushy, disruptive, a liar. Like, I could go on to the list of retaliation. And I think the biggest thing was being threatened with insubordination, because insubordination is the only offense that you could be fired for right away. Other things you have to make a case for, like work performance, whatever. But insubordination, they could fire you like that. So being threatened with insubordination for pointing out an implicit bias. When the person wrote a whole article saying they don't know anything about diversity and they want feedback, they want us to educate them. But as soon as you point out one implicit bias, you get threatened with insubordination.
No way.
Yes.
Like, that's like, listen, that makes it almost impossible for us to be advocates in our work, right? Like,
yes.
to even face that, even that, right? Like those
Yes.
those sort of examples you just gave us, like, it almost forces you to be part of the problem, the larger problem we talked about earlier, because there's nothing you can do, even in your own spaces, organizations, institutions, or corporations, that could shift the dynamics of white supremacy. It's like, this is the way it's going to be, and this is the way it's going to stay, despite the fact that it could cause so much harm to so many people, right? So it's like it forces us to, like, become part of the problem, even if we're challenging. We're like, no, we don't want to be part of the problem. We want to sort of, make a difference here. And so, what do you think prompted that sort of feedback or backlash in the way that you experienced it?
I think truth. That's what I've come to realize. People don't like the truth. That in explaining that, hey, you all aren't just nice white people. Like, they're really, like, you can't just be nice. There's things you actually have to do to become anti-racist and treat people equally and with value and with respect. Like, I remember sitting in an all-white meeting for DBT, and I'm telling them, hey, did you know, like, when we teach biosocial theory, invalidation can come from racism, from homophobia, not just like from your family, like invalidation of who you are. And literally they all just stared at me. And I was just like, oh, you feel like wrong for even bringing stuff up. Then later on, they'll like use it as their own idea and everything. But at the time, it felt like, don't ever speak about diversity because somehow you think you know better than us. And that's what I think it is. If white's the standard and you challenge it, they feel, I think, fragile, insecure, right? That's why white fragility is such a term now, because as soon as you challenge them, they sort of backlash, right? Whether passive aggressively or directly, like being threatened. And literally, I've had that person say a year ago, like, I believe in the status quo. Like, I'm going to keep the status quo going, right? Like, how can you be for diversity and keep the status quo going? That's like a very inconsistent thing. And so,
Yeah.
you know,
No, and I think to myself, what sort of like what you're saying is like, if you're so used to being the authority, right, because of your whiteness, that's it, nothing else, just whiteness, that makes you authority, right?
Yes.
Then when we come in, right, and start sort of sharing space, right, and showing up as who we are, it's like we're challenging whatever that authority is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think so. What I'm hearing, what you're saying is like the sort of inserting your ideas, inserting your solutions, and so on and so forth, can challenge the white authority, which is the white
because
standard.
they only want tokens. They
That's
want
right.
their websites and brochures to look good. And I literally was on the website and the brochure to make the organization look good, but they didn't respect me.
And you was
right?
and you was feeling yourself, right? You was like, I want the brochure,
Listen,
the website. You was feeling
beautiful.
yourself.
I mean, I am beautiful, but I mean, I think that I wanted it for the students, right? To feel like they had people for them. That was my intention. I didn't realize I was being tokenized because I didn't realize how little respect they had for me or my value. And that's the difference. You can feel the difference. If you're a representation, your organization will love you, will celebrate you, will listen to your ideas, will promote you. But if you're a token, you will be nice on the cover on the website, but you'll be treated like shit in the person. And I think that's what people of color have to be careful of, to not be tokenized, because we are too valuable. There's literally only, well, I don't know about social workers, but there's only 14% of psychologists who are not white. And so if you divide that among the races, right, like that's like two, like it's 2%. So it's we're very valuable. And even though I think someone wrote like we get paid less and we are not valued, we really are needed for our communities. They need to see us and heal with us and be with us in this. And that's what I wanted to say in terms of healing. I would say that like what I've been thinking about since I did my own practice is the power of love. But I wasn't trained. Like if I was to say that in grad school, that I love my clients, I'd be like, out. But love is so healing. Relationships are so healing. The therapeutic relationship is so healing. Community.
So you're talking about the solution?
Yes, yes.
Don't be skipping the prompts. Hello. So Zaynab, can you come up with like one solution that will allow us to sort of deal with or combat white supremacy in the mental health field?
So I would say from my personal experience, it is love. I think like people who come to this work are doing it for healing, for love. And I see what I give to my clients as a form of love. Obviously, it's not the same as romantic love or family love, but it is a type of love because healing is really important. And part of that love is unconditional acceptance, right, of our clients and not pathologizing them and being in community with them, being in a healing relationships with them, because white supremacy has like stripped it down. There are people that will tell you a manual could do this or a computer program can do this, but it's not true. We know in our communities that healing with love is what we need to heal trauma, to heal all the pain, all the racism. And so I think that this idea that manuals and all of that is white supremacy, and we need to fight back as therapists by not pathologizing our clients and letting them know when they come to us, that's racism. You don't, and your anxiety doesn't define you. That's racism. That's sexism. That's transphobia. And I'm going to help you honor and empower yourself. Be yourself. Connect to your true, authentic self.
Yes.
And then we're going to help you find things. Because the question I always tell them is, do you think Harriet Tubman is a liar? No, I hope you don't think it, but there are strategies. So we can strategize how to deal with your racist boss or your sexist partner or whatever. But you yourself, nothing is wrong with you. You are perfect. And I want you to embrace that authentic, beautiful self so that we could fight against. Because like Audre Lorde said, like self-care is not self-indulgent. It is an act of revolution, because they don't want us to exist. They want to kill us. They want to ban us. They want us to be submissive. They want us to be exploited. So us being our best, true, authentic selves is how we start fighting the system. You living your best life is how you fight the system.
That's right. And you know, it's so interesting when you talked about love, you know, I think about trauma-informed practice. And when you look at trauma-informed practice and how that works, if you really pay attention, we're talking about being loving in our trauma-informed practice, right? We're not trained in trauma-informed practice that's being loving, but that's exactly what we're doing, right? We're being loving. Yeah. And I remember when I was in a high school that I worked at West Brooklyn in Brooklyn, New York, and it was all about trauma-informed practice, which is where I basically learned about trauma-informed practice. And when I would learn more about it and learn more about it and learn more about it, as I kept learning, I kept hearing the same things over and over again. But I identified the theme in trauma-informed practice is in fact love. Right? How do we be loving human beings towards each other, right? And when people come to us for services, the trauma-informed practice is, how do I show you love? How do I be loving towards you? And the loving component is the healing part, right? Yes. You know, when you think about the therapeutic relationship in itself is the component that heals the most, right? That human being to human being relationship. And that is an expression, whether we want to call it or not, say it is or not, an expression of love. And so I'm all the way there with you.
Yeah. And Rumi says love is the bridge between you and everything. And I feel like therapy creates that. And that's how we can re-empower our clients.
I feel like so soft and butterfly inside, right? So now we're at almost time now, but so I just want to sort of close off. I mean, we can see if there's any comments in the thing and the little thing. I don't know how to really work the little thing because I have a little. There's a lot of comments.
Yes, I think some good insight.
Relationship is so important. Yeah, okay, I see that. Yep. Dr. Shade Queen. Oh, that's a good name. Dr. Shade Queen.
I love it.
So anyway, I mean, so here's the thing. I just want to sort of, I would love, I feel like we have to do longer, you know, like longer IG lives so that we can really engage with the people in the chat.
Yeah.
I feel like really bad for like taking away an hour.
Yeah.
It's even hard to like get people for 15 minutes, let alone an hour. And so I just want to sort of thank you for coming and participating in this IG series. Yeah. I really appreciate it. For those of you who are interested in Freedom Fighters of the Minds, we are meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Mallory. Hi, Mallory.
Hi, where's Mallory?
She's the Shaw Queen, Dr. Shaw Queen.
Oh, Mallory, that's Mallory. That's
and Linda, nice to see you, Linda.
You know what, Mallory? That makes sense.
Yes.
Just saying. Like it was giving me vibes. You're amazing, Zaynab.
I love all the people on live. I love it. Oh, hi, Amanda. Look all.
And the Spicy Colombiana is there.
I love it. It's so good to see all of you.
People love shout outs.
Yes.
Cornerstone Psychotherapy, JP Care Counseling Wellness. We love shout outs, don't we?
Yeah.
Dr. Shea Queen is there. I can't read. I think I need glasses because I just can't read.
You're getting old.
Yeah, I'm getting old. Freedom Fighters of the Mind is an initiative. Tomorrow's our next meeting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're interested in Freedom Fighters of the Minds, you can email me at antonio@theliberatedself.org so I can send you the Zoom link. Additionally, moving forward, we'll sort of restart these lives in January of 2022. So this will be our last IG live series, installment for this particular year. So thank you so much for everyone who's joined us.
Thank you, Antonio, for creating this space.
Yes.
It's so needed and not done. Thank you for breaking the silence and having us. And I can't wait to watch more of these. And thank you for having me.
You have, besides that, thank you and you're welcome. Do you have any final things or thoughts that you want to sort of close us out with?
Just that you all, every single person who's watching is amazing, and never, ever, ever let racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, any of that make you doubt how amazing you are. Never, ever let it make you doubt it.
Aww. Okay. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night. Enjoy your holidays, and we'll see you in January 2022. Now, let's see if I can shut this off.
Okay.
White Supremacy. You're welcome, Spicy Colombiana.